keep the videos on. And I think we'll begin. Am I getting a nod that I can start? I'm getting the nod. Okay, it's official. I am going to welcome you all. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lana, and I have the honor of being the chair of PJ Library in the United Kingdom. Welcome to tonight's event. It's a special event with Michal Oshman and Neil Blair. Now, Neil Blair is J.K. Rowling's agent and founding partner of the Blair Partnership and chairman of Pottermore. And I've known Neil for many, many years. I've put it down to 40 years, but Neil actually is saying it's 42. But, so yes, indeed, that is a very long time good friends for. And I've actually known Michal for a couple of years. And we started a few years ago learning if I would help promote Michal's book. I was absolutely thrilled to do it. And here is the copy. This is what it looks like. It is Michal Oshman's new book, which is What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? It is a very brave book. It's wonderful. It's very personal. She's incorporating her own trials, as we all have them in our lives, and she's sharing them very generously and incorporating Jewish wisdom and how it has lifted up her life and given it meaning and purpose. So Michal, thank you very much for that. Michal is head of culture and diversity and inclusion at TikTok Europe and a former leadership expert at Facebook. She's also a mum of 4 children, aged between 4 and 15 years old, and is a very proud Israeli and Jewess. Now, before we start, a couple of housekeeping items. Firstly, we are recording this event and I hope to share the link with you in a few days. But secondly, if you have any questions along the way, please do put them on our chat and we will endeavor to make sure there's some time for Michal to answer them at the end. Finally, if you have joined us and you have children or grandchildren aged 8 or under, please make sure they are signed up for their PJ Library books, which are full every month with Jewish traditions and values. And for more information on that, please go to pjlibrary.org.uk and you will find that hopefully on the chat site as well. And now it's over to Michal and Neil. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lana. And hello, everybody. And hi, Michal. Hope you are well.
Yes, feeling good. Hi, Neil. Thank you, Lana, for your very, very kind intro.
Indeed. Thank you very much. So I'm very excited about this evening, Michal. And I'm sure everyone, as Lana was saying, is going to really, really enjoy hearing you talk. What Lana didn't explain, in addition to being a friend of yours, I'm also your agent. And I'm presuming that most people on this Zoom won't have actually read your book yet. But I'm able to plug the book, which perhaps you might not want to do yourself as your agent. And hopefully everyone after this interview will be inspired and go out and buy the book and hear and read more detail of what we're going to discuss. Before I get into asking you some questions, I thought it'd be interesting for everyone to know how we came together and my reaction. I was delighted when one of my colleagues, Rory, told me that he was speaking to you about a book. And I also heard from my friend Nicola, who was your boss at Facebook at the time, that she was excited that we were talking to you because she knew what an inspirational person you were and how an important book that you were writing it was going to be. And I think, as we're going to discover shortly, the content was so relevant when you thought about doing it and so relevant now and will be in the future, particularly for Jewish families that are struggling to bring up their kids and to have them proud of being Jewish at a time when there's so many pressures from social media and friends, whether it's anti-Israeli feeling or whether it's anti-religious feeling, and your book couldn't be any more timely. So let me start by asking you a question, the title of the book. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Can you tell our audience where that came from and what you're saying to people?
Of course. Thank you, Neil. And I just want to start, and I love things kind of staying really real. So first of all, I'm feeling a bit emotional because I can see neighbors on the call. I can see Rory, I can see Ellie, I can see all the people that I either am friends with or on the journey with, and actually you're all my friends. So it's kind of easier for me to speak on a stage with like 500 people that I don't know, but this is like my community. So it's kind of a special experience, which makes it even kind of, more unique for me. But I'm having also a little bit of a, what would you do if you weren't afraid moment, just like having this conversation now. So I just wanted you to know how I'm feeling, but it is really special. And thank you for everyone that jumped on this call. So you mentioned Nicola Mendelsohn, who is my inspiration. I worked at Facebook for 7 years. And I joined Facebook just at the time that I started discovering the Jewish wisdom, which is the story in this book. And it was quite magical when I started discovering Chassidut and realizing that there is a way to heal myself as a person that's been dealing with mental health issues most of my life. At the same time that I made that discovery, I joined Facebook. And then as I entered reception on my first day at work, there was a big sign on the wall and it said, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" It's one of Facebook's mantras. And it was a very special moment for me. I was 38 years old. I was living in fear my whole life, suffering from anxiety, going to therapy, taking medication. And suddenly through Jewish wisdom and anecdotally this new Facebook job, I realized that there is a possibility, there's an option potentially to live with less fear, or maybe even fearless living. And that was a really meaningful moment in my life.
Excellent, and we're going to get into a bit more detail about the Jewish wisdom in your book. But just to complete the point, what I think is so important is that a time when a young generation are being told about anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, and now there's Holocaust denial, and then the problems in the media with Israeli Palestine, etc. To have a book that's presented that showcases the important aspects of life that come from Jewish wisdom that are relevant to all people, not just to people of the Jewish faith. It's such a positive thing, and maybe signals that it might be a club that is worth joining rather than one that might be embarrassed about joining. So if you were to highlight one aspect of the discovery that you have been through on Jewish wisdom, what would you start with? And then we can get into to other areas a little bit later. But what's the key one that's important for you?
I think you're touching on one of them already, that the Jewish nation, our identity, our essence is to be fearless. If you look back at our history of thousands of years, we've always faced challenge and we've been always kind of at risk, let's say, and the Jewish I believe approach is a culture. I'm talking everything I talk about, by the way, I'm a culture person. That's what I was supposed to do at work. I love the idea of bringing things to life through behavior and values. So I also see I talk about Jewish wisdom from Judaism, but it's a way of living. It's a way of approaching life. And the way of approaching life, the Jewish way of approaching life is fearless. It's kol haolam kulo gesher tzar me'od. The whole entire world is a very narrow bridge, and it's about crossing the bridge. And this concept gives me and my children now a lot of confidence, because this too will be something that we will overcome, but we have to be very clear about who we are, what we're here to do, and to feel proud of ourselves.
Absolutely, and that's a fantastic, important message to start with. We're going to focus a little bit during the early part of this conversation about parenting, and obviously PJ Library presents books for parents to read with their children, for their children to read themselves. So again, your top discovery from your research and that you then put into this fantastic book. From the Jewish wisdom that helps with parenting. What would you share with our audience?
So when I was, so as you mentioned, Lana kindly mentioned before, I have 4 children, and I was a mother to a first-time mother, a very anxious first-time mother. And when I studied psychology, I learned that actually a child is born tabula rasa, like a clean slate. And actually it's everything that I would do to them or my husband and how I will be, my daughter is my first, it's kind of all on me. And that kind of, I think, again, kind of evoked a lot of anxiety. It's like, oh my gosh, she's coming clean, neutral, and whatever she turns out to be, it's my responsibility. If she's awesome, okay, but she's not, it's, you know, those kind of, and for an anxious person, that is very, very difficult. And I think lots of parents are anxious when they have their first child. And then I learned the first parenting advice, I think, in Jewish history, which is from Melech Shlomo, from King Solomon. And what King Solomon says, and I want to, in Hebrew it's Chanoch hanar al pi darko, but for us that don't speak Hebrew, teach a child according to his way. Even when he goes old, he will return to it. And I realized that our children, my children, all children, have a soul, have a unique soul, have a unique story, a godly soul that is coming here to this world, not randomly, not by chance, but they need to be here, and they're here to go on a journey. And as a parent, my job is to guide them, to help them go on that journey. But they weren't born neutral. They were born already with a story, with a narrative, with a way, with a derech. And that's a completely different way, I think, for me at least, was to look at parenting, which meant I'm not here to impose, I'm not here to make them fulfill my dreams or my parents' dream, or to make, you know, I'm here to help them actually discover who they are. At the same time, I always loved the idea of having boundaries at home and being very clear about what's good and bad and what does it mean to grow up as a mensch. So my neighbor next door knows that, of course, I raise my voice, and I don't want to sell myself as this parent, this perfect mom, but I realized that I can adopt this combination of really trying to work with each of my children on who they are individually, what they were born to be and to do, and at the same time, give them a structure of life, give them boundaries, healthy boundaries, containing boundaries, and combining those two. I just want to say another beautiful Chassidut message that I love, and I think Lana, you and me really love this one, is the day you were born is the day that the world was missing you. And I think that's also a message that I try to give to my children. Like, each of them have a soul, they have a reason that they arrived here. At the age of 4, they came for something. At the age of 10, at the age of 20. And my job, I think, is to help them discover this.
That's lovely. Before I return to a kind of series of questions about parenting and advice that you might give to new parents and to relationships with your husband, etc., I just want to ask you some questions about your background and your journey to this Zoom call and talking to everybody and to being a published author and your job currently at TikTok. Because you know, I think that one of the things that strikes people, I'm sure everyone is watching this right now feeling this, that you come across as incredibly confident, and as Lana explained in the introduction, you've been very successful. So how is someone like you being racked with so much anxiety, and how on journey, and why, and how did that lead to you needing to discover this Jewish wisdom that's helped you in later years? So if you could explain to everyone a little bit about your journeys from from being a little girl.
Yeah. By my grandparents, who were Holocaust survivors, and we lived next to them. And my grandmother Chana, Savta Chana, she managed to jump off the train which was on the way to Auschwitz, and she saved herself. She got seriously injured, but she managed to live, and obviously met my grandfather, and they arrived to Israel. But she was very much post-traumatized, and most of my childhood memories are around hearing her screamed during the night from the fear of the Nazis. I mean, yelling in Yiddish, but I actually understood Yiddish at a young age, from the fear of the Nazis coming to get me. I was her everything. She was always really trying to get me eat a lot of food. She used to really force feed me chicken soup because she knew if the Nazis arrive or any enemy, or if I'm at risk, she wanted me to be full. And after they passed away, actually, we found crazy amount of food, tuna cans and baby powder, a baby formula, to, again, they were just preparing for the next Shoah, the next Holocaust. She also told me that the Holocaust will happen again, and she gave me advice on how to. So my whole life was like, I knew exactly when they come what I was going to do and how I'm going to. It didn't help also that my father was the head forensic pathologist of Israel. He was the chief coroner, I think, for 20 years. And, we all make mistakes as parents, and I definitely make mistakes. I think one of the things that my parents did is they didn't shield enough death from my life. It was all kind of a big mishmash. And also Israel, and you always see in the news, and terror attacks. And anyway, I saw things that a child at the age of 5 or 7 shouldn't see. So that created a lot of fear and anxiety. Of course, I didn't tell anyone because I wanted everyone to be so happy with me, and I wanted to be perfect and make it worth the surviving of the Holocaust. I was very Holocaust oriented. I don't know if that's a good phrase in English, but I think you know what I mean. So I carried the 6 million, like many of us do, on my shoulders in many ways. So, but at the same time, I was highly functional, good student, good daughter, good friend, good everything. I was in the military, I was in the IDF, I was an officer there, I performed really well. I had a little breakdown after serving in the Israeli Defense Forces. And actually, it was my girlfriends in the army, when I first time told them the thoughts that I have in my head. I thought it was normal thoughts, but the first time when I voiced what goes through my head, they said in Hebrew, it's zelo beseder, like it's not okay. You are not well. And then I started going to therapy and taking medication, and again, try to kind of keep myself going. But I wasn't making much progress. I learned through psychotherapy, how to become more self-aware and how to ask questions about feelings and emotions, because in my household, we didn't talk about feelings much. And for the first 38 years of my life, I thought that it's all about kind of blaming my parents for all of my misery. And at some point, I felt like I was this vicious cycle of blaming, unfinished business, not speaking to my parents, leaving Israel, going, and nothing was really, I wasn't getting anywhere. At the same time, I already have 3 children. And at the age of 38, I got to a specifically low place when I believe I channeled a lot of what was going on me to anti-aging treatments. And I was one of those women when you see in the underground or in the street, and like she just looks like, you ask yourself, like, why does she do this to herself? I think I just tried to get control on all of these really difficult feelings. So I remember I went to the doctor and was like, just freeze my face and like da-da-da-da. And I knew I wasn't good, but I couldn't help myself. I became quite obsessed. And when I one time came back home and I looked bad, and he looked at me, my husband, and he said, Michal, like, how can I help? I realized that I'm going to get healing from another source, not the therapy room and not the Botox doctor.
And that's the journey when you started to discover the wisdom that you cover in your book.
Yeah.
And so mentioning your husband, who I know is a great source of strength for you and your family, of the discoveries that you've made, what has sort of affected your relationship with him the most, would you say?
So this, I just want to talk about the discovery, because, Neil, like I look like the same woman. Well, I don't have Botox and fillers like that anymore. I mean, I have a little bit, but not like to that extent. But I if someone looks at me from the outside, you know, when people often go on the journey of Judaism, people ask, okay, so like, what did you do? What did you change? How do you look? Does she look different? I look pretty much the same. I wear my jeans. I kept carried with the same job, but what I don't cover my hair. So like from the outside, I'm pretty much similar to Michal that I was before. But what I discovered in quite a miraculous way, which I write about in the book, that actually in Yahadut, in Judaism is all about healing the soul. First of all, I had no idea I had a soul. No one told me I had a soul. You know, my father conducted autopsy for 40,000 dead bodies. And I remember asking him one time, you know, Abba, is there anything else there in the body? Is there a small baby body in the big body that carries on? And he said, no, we're only flesh. So I think because I had no access to spirituality, I did not know it was quite upsetting to think about that, all the feelings that we have as human, like what one day it's gonna disappear. And when I learned that each of us have a godly soul, and this soul arrives here for a purpose and is coming from somewhere and it's going somewhere, I realized that all of those feelings that I had, like these emotions about something more deep and more spiritual, they were real. I just didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't have someone to talk to, you know, with, because I wasn't exposed to this. I was brought up in Tel Aviv in a kind of, completely secular way. So when I discovered that Judaism heals the deep elements, the spiritual elements of Judaism, and by the way, they are totally universal, and the book is universal. Everyone and anyone, and you know, Rory, you mentioned Rory. I love Rory. You know, I came to see Rory after, you know, a few agents already wanted. Sorry?
We all love Rory.
Yeah. So I came to see Rory and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to talk about Judaism, la, 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 you know, and that was even like today, I don't know how I would enter even starting to have this conversation with an agent. And I said, like, Rory, I suffered my whole life from mental health, and I just need the world to know that in Judaism, there's a way to heal your soul. And Rory said, tell me more. So I met Rory before the book was written. So we wrote the book together, knowing that we wanted the readership to be everyone and anyone, because these concepts are universal. And, you know, by the way, all sorts of concepts that are now, you know, very popular in self-help, like Brené Brown, it's like, etc. You can see the Judaism in it. So I just had to share this discovery with the world.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. And I remember when we first chatted that I told you that I had studied jurisprudence, the philosophy of law at university, and you know, without boring everyone to death on this call, the teacher told me that, you know, if you look certainly in the Western countries and the Judeo-Christian philosophy and format, our laws date all the way back to the Old Testament and through to the New Testament and to today. And so there's a lot of wisdom that's part of Western society that comes from Judaism that people are sort of unaware of. But I think, as you say, there's something for everybody in your book, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, religious or not. I think they'll understand that these are universal truths, as you said. I just wanted to pause for a moment to let everyone know, if you wanted to ask some questions by way of the chat button on your Zoom, please do so now. And when we get towards the end, we will include those for Michal before we will finish. So some parenting tips that you can give to people. You've obviously said earlier on that you have 4 kids, which is obviously a handful. What tips can you provide for the parents listening, whether they are already parents with a number of kids, or about to become parents for the first time?
So this is a few voices that I'm going to share, Neil. One is my own personal voice as a 45-year-old woman, mother, as you said, from my own personal experience, combined, of course, with the Jewish wisdom. So first of all, as you know, as we said, the starting point is that, you know, your child has a soul, and your role is really to try and discover, you know, what their soul is all about, and help them connect with themselves. The other element that I really love, and this is the way that Yair and I raise our children. We care deeply about them becoming mensches, right? Becoming decent people. And we care less, and I'm not saying that this should be the general approach, but we care less about academic like studies and results. I mean, it doesn't mean that I don't care what my children get as grades, but I don't care about it as much. So the children know that if something's not going good with school, with accomplishments and we can talk about this and figure it out. It's not going to be a really big deal. But if they behave in a way that is disrespectful, let's say to their friends or to their grandparents, it's something that we're going to have we're going to care about it deeply, because we believe that we're here to be good to each other, to be kind to each other, and to be thoughtful. And that's something that we really are promoting, let's say, at home. And one of the first things that we introduced to our family, and it was step by step, was actually introducing Shabbat. Because what we realized, Yair and I realized a few things. One, we grew up in Israel. So when you're in Israel, it doesn't matter Chiloni, Dati, secular, like you feel your identity. There's a lot of identity, there's a lot of meaning in the air. For example, on the Day of Atonement or on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, everyone's wearing white, or there's no cars on the Day of Atonement. So like you get from the air almost, you feel on Friday night, there's this sense, regardless if you keep Shabbat or not, but it's in the air. And we realized, living outside of Israel for 17 years, that unless we bring some of that identity to our children deliberately, consciously, with some planning, we don't know exactly, who they're going to be and what identity. And we know that children need identity. They need to know where they're coming from and where they are and where they're going. So we decided to introduce Shabbat slowly into our household. We also realized that we live a hectic, crazy lifestyle, and that we need some space as a family. So listen, whoever has children knows that taking away a child's iPad on a Saturday morning is not an easy task. But we explain to the children, it's not about taking their iPad away from them. It's actually creating space for us to connect as a family. So one of the tips I could say is, regardless of wanting to keep, you don't have to keep all of Shabbat, you don't have to keep Shabbat at all, but how can you introduce a space at home to be able to be together, to connect as a family without interruption? And when we started having Shabbat dinner, when we started doing Kiddush, which I never had in my family and Yair never had in his family, it was a new experience for us as well. So we were trying to think, how can we make this an adventure for our children? So let's say when I started lighting Shabbat candles, I was saying to my daughter, women have been doing this for thousands of years. How awesome it is that we can just try it. And when we're sitting around the table, we started bringing these rituals and kind of giving some, connecting around ideas. But one of the things that I write about the book, and this is an inspiration from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I like Chabad very, very much. One of the things that Lubavitcher Rebbe, which is like probably the most kind of biggest, I guess, rabbi in the last century, is to give compliments to each other. I think he said, and Lana, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he said, like, every time you finish a letter, and back then it was a letter, finish with a compliment, say something nice, because we all do think nice things about each other, but we don't always say them. That's why I wanted Rory to know, I love you, Rory, and Ellie, and Adam, and lots of people on the call. So we were sitting down on Friday night dinner, but like, couldn't really find it hard to engage with each other. We are a loving family, but we realized we have some work to do on being kind to each other. So we introduced this thing called compliments game, which is every Friday night after we do Kiddush and we eat the meal, every one of us gives compliment to each member of the family. When we started doing this game, it was horrible playing this game. No one can say anything about it. Yair and I found it easy, but the children was like, I have nothing good to say about you. You're my enemy. As any parent that we know, when there's children, he's my enemy, it drove us mad. And we said, you know what, no dessert. We're going to give you time. Have a think. A compliment could be, thank you so much for, printing my homework when the printer was stuck, but something nice. It took us a few months and a bit of frustration, but eventually the children knew that this thing is going to happen every Friday night, and they prepared themselves ahead to say something nice on the Shabbat dinner table. And at one point, one of my children told me, Ima, mommy, I now see things that I haven't seen before, because of the compliments game. So these are the things that I think take dedication and commitment from parents. You have to do this in a regular basis, but then it becomes the essence of your family. It doesn't mean that we don't argue. Of course we do. It doesn't mean that it's all like la 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 here. But every Friday night, each of us gets 5 compliments from our family, and it's beautiful.
That is beautiful. And during that little answer, you mentioned you have a hectic life, and as we alluded to before, you have a full-time important job as well as 4 kids. And you know, talk a little bit about that, and again, what discoveries and lessons that you've learned that's helped you balance and manage all of that.
I don't balance. I try to integrate. I'm actually today thinking, how can I improve? Because I've neglected my physical well-being. I was telling Ellie the other day, like, I have to start moving myself a bit more. But I think I'm getting so much energy from the mission behind the book and speaking like with people and connecting and hearing stories, that I'm needing less sleep and maybe less exercise, but that's not okay. Yeah, like all of us, we do our best, right? I have this job. It's an exciting job. It's a growing organization. I think that it has a lot of goodness that it can continue to do in the world. And I think once I found my deeper meaning and more connecting to who I am, then I have much more energy. So I'm actually getting, you know, I don't want to say touch wood, that's not a Jewish thing, but more energy than less energy with all of this project.
Well, that's good. Otherwise, Rory and I were having to apologise to put you through even more work to help promote the book. I'm not going to dwell on this in detail because you're here to talk about yourself and the book, and then in a minute, but PJ Library. But you have worked at 2 of the largest social media companies, and I think for many parents, particularly teenage kids. And obviously in JFS, it's in the news at the moment. Are there any particular insights that you have for parents that are worried about their kids on social media from being, you know, so close to the centre of operations at those companies?
You know, I'm sitting here today wearing my, you know, new author hat, but of course I'm also wearing my mother hat and my executive and, you know, social media hat and all of those. So, you know, I will touch on them as well. First of all, like any parent, I have 2 children who are teenagers and 2 that are a bit younger. I care deeply, and I often am concerned about how they consume and what they consume. Personally, I think that there is, and listen, and whatever I say, you know, there's so much more to say about this, and I'm definitely not an expert on social media, and I'm not an expert. I come from the HR world. But as a parent, I can say, I see my job as a parent to facilitate slowly, the engagement that my children have with social media. I will be the first one to say no, but I will also be the mother to say yes and to connect to their account. For example, my daughter has a TikTok account. She's at the age that she can have, and I'm a parent. In TikTok, we have a pairing way to when our children are on the platform, to see what they consume, to be able to control what they consume, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think that the social media companies, and I can only speak for TikTok because that's where I work, have a responsibility and accountability to protect all of the users from hate, from, you know, all the things that shouldn't be on the platform. And at the same time, I have a role as a parent to guide my child of what's good for her or bad for her. I know you mentioned JFS. I know it's a very sensitive topic for our community at the moment. Maybe for many people on the call, they wouldn't know what about it. It's a big school that's been going through a tough time. Yeah, this needs to be taken very seriously, but I also believe that parents have a role to know and to try to know what their children are doing. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I think that's really wise, words from you to encourage the parents to be more involved as far as they can with their kids' activity on social media. Well, we're guests of PJ Library on this Zoom, and many people have joined through the invitations from them, which we're obviously very grateful for. What has your experience been of PJ Library yourself?
I think PJ Library is amazing. I had a call with Lauren and with Lana. I mean, listen, I have a pile of books here. So we read PJ Library, but there's so many books that I wanted to share, but actually connected to the subject on different areas, by the way, on feminism, on being yourself, on friendships. But the specific book that I wanted to share, and by the way, like anything, it's not enough to kind of, it's amazing that PJ Library, you send us the books, and thank you so much. But I think it's also, you know, our role as parents to be able to bring this to our children, to read it with them, and to bring meaning. So one of the favorite books that I have is called, you know, Here is the World, which is a year of Jewish holidays. And it takes you through the cycle, right? People like, everyone likes, how to say, like, to know what to expect, to be able to plan, to have, it gives people safety. I think that the Jewish calendar also gives a lot of bitachon, which is a word in Hebrew, and safety, like, you know, Pesach is going to come, and Rosh Hashanah is going to come, and it has meaning, and every holiday has its own spiritual meaning, right? Pesach is about getting rid of like your ego and becoming more free in yourself. And Rosh Hashanah is about starting anew and being the new version of yourself. And these are all spiritual moments. And one of the beautiful things that I have, that I think your books offer, is that it guides us as parents how to tell the story. So instead of saying, Rosh Hashanah is coming, I need to buy you new shoes, is like, Rosh Hashanah is coming, which is that time of year when we take a minute and we think about the years that's passed and how we want to approach our new year, and that renewal. And again, you don't have to start doing psychotherapy around it, but just giving the children this identity of there's always something happening in the Jewish calendar. And every time that there's a moment that something is happening in the Jewish calendar, you can find yourself there. That's why we go in a circular way. So I think PJ are awesome. I like, and such an amazing brand globally. And I'm really proud to be invited to talk with you today under the PJ Library umbrella.
Yes, likewise. And I know when Lana comes back on at the end to finish off, she'll explain a little bit more to some of the new guests about PJ Library. Just going to encourage everyone again to ask some questions on chat. I'm astonished, you know, given the amount of Jewish people on here, let alone the non-Jewish people, that I haven't been inundated. And normally you can't stop people asking questions. So please do so. In the meantime, I've got a couple more questions to ask you. If that's okay. You touched a little bit before about your kids, and you obviously explained you got 4, and they're obviously at very different ages and at different developments, that's obviously a challenge. And how do you cope with that? And again, what wisdom have you discovered that's helped you to parenting different kids at different ages and the different challenges that they are facing?
Well, that's such a good question. I think one of the things I learned also from the Jewish wisdom is to be able to understand this conflict that we deal with as human beings every day, which is the kind of good and bad inclination, or, you know, that ego, non-ego side of us. So I think I love to death my 4 kids. There was one child that he kind of challenged me more throughout the years. I don't know, sometimes you have that child that's like one a bit easier and one more challenging, and we love them all the same way, but like just that child that used to bring out the less beautiful things of me as a mother. So I'm being really honest. I hope I won't get fired if this gets shown at work. And I didn't know how to deal. I really was embarrassed of myself at some point of how I was being a mother to this one of my children, because I was just like, I was losing it, right? And no parent, we don't like that ourselves when we start either, you know, being a version of ourselves that we don't like. And actually by trying to talk to this specific child from an angle of Jewish wisdom, which is that we all have this tension inside ourselves, like wanting to do something bad, or wanting to go against, or wanting to, you know, not being the best version of ourselves. And that's completely normal. And then how you can be aware of that, see it before it's coming. And by the way, the same thing I would say to myself. How can I see that coming, and how can I overcome that? And I think one of the things I taught myself and my children, when we overcome, when we're able to manage that thing inside that wants to do something negative, it's such a win. So I learned actually that, you know, using like superhero terms of like overcoming your yetzer hara, your ego, and really trying to pivot to something positive is just such a small metaphor or a way to think about life and behavior, but it goes a long way. And in that way, Neil, I think I speak the same way to my 7-year-old, to my 15-year-old, and to myself, because I really think that many of the principles in Jewish wisdom, I don't think they're attached so much to age. I think they're more attached to soul. they're almost like ageless. So yeah, I don't know if I have a unique approach to different age.
Well, that's really interesting. I'm pleased to say I've had a couple of questions here. I'm going to read them both out to you and then let you answer them. And also just to let you know, we've had a very nice message from someone from South Africa, which is great. So to know that there's people across the globe listening to it.
I'm coming to South Africa on Zoom next week, a meeting with Miss Ilana Africa and an in conversation with Ilana Africa. So if you wanted to join, I can send you the invite.
Brilliant. Well, someone that I met on Twitter, mostly I find my experience on Twitter has been pretty awful, but I have met some really good people, and this is one. So Shay Adler has asked, he'd like to know if you can discuss about compassion in Judaism and how do you pass this value, which he says he's finding is a very Jewish value, into education. And then from my brilliant EA, who we also love, Ellie, she asks, what guidance can there be found in Jewish wisdom to help manage conflict between children?
Oh, okay. Conflict and compassion. Maybe it's not by chance that these two are asked side by side. So I think with conflict, I think it's quite similar to what we said about like the good and the bad inclination. I think first of all, and this is the language that I use, normalize that life is full of conflict. And one of the sayings that I love in Jewish wisdom, and I know Lana is with you, is that struggle is a vehicle for growth. And unfortunately, the way to grow is struggle. Now, no one wants to struggle and no one wants heartbreak, but it just happens to be that that's how we grow. So first of all, instead of like fearing conflict, and fearing feeling uncomfortable, it's almost like embracing it because it's going to happen anyway. Now, I'm a huge believer in having real conversations. I go to sleep, it's all out. I mean, hopefully in a thoughtful way. So I think part of, I don't know if it's Jewish, I don't know if it's a culture or more of a cultural thing, is keep things honest, and be real, but actually with compassion. So I think one of the things that I love, and I don't think it comes from Jewish wisdom, is assume good intent. It's actually something that I learned in Facebook. Internally, Facebook is a wonderful place to work. It has a very nice culture. And one of the things I learned there is like assume good intent. So when you feel that there's conflict, assume good intent. Even if you have to force yourself, right? When I have an argument with my husband, sometimes we have arguments, I try my best to say, he's coming with good intent. It feels like he's stepping on my but he's coming with good intent. And to be able to call the elephant in the room. I think one of the things I feel very strongly about is we don't communicate openly enough, and we don't talk about the things in an open and we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable. I actually think going to compassion, I think that in Jewish wisdom, there's a lot about being vulnerable, a lot about feelings, a lot about how your soul is feeling, how your heart is feeling, and also knowing that you're here to do something meaningful. So I think that compassion comes from the idea, there's this beautiful Hasidic saying that says, you may arrive to this world and live 80, 90 years just to do a favor for someone else. Like, that's such a nice way of thinking. Maybe I'm just here to do something meaningful. I haven't done it yet, or maybe I have, but like, maybe I'm just here to do something. Maybe Rory arrived to birth this book. I know you birthed a lot of other books and a child, Rory, but do you know what I mean? It just makes you think completely in a different way. Maybe I'm here just to do something for you. And obviously the idea of tzedakah, which tzedakah is not charity. It's tzedakah comes from the word tzedek. It's the right thing to do. So the whole idea in tzedakah is about doing things for other, giving money, volunteering, donating. It's actually the right thing to do. You're not doing a favor. You're playing your role in this world. And I am a huge believer in volunteering. We volunteer as a family. And it's good for mental health. I call it vitamin V. Vitamin V. The moment you do something meaningful for someone else, you immediately feel better about yourself. So it's a beautiful, safe vitamin to take.
Yes, absolutely.
You should know this as a huge V person. So you should feel good all the time, Neil.
Oh, that's very, very kind of you. Yeah, well, I'm trustee of a charity called Gift. And its resident lecturer is encouraging everybody, including very young kids, to get into that habit of giving. And you're exactly right, to get the vitamin V. So I'm pleased to say that the floodgates have opened. So I've got some really good questions here for you. So Leslie asks, how long did it take you to heal your soul, and how did you do it? Did someone help you, or was it autodidactic?
Hi, Leslie. Okay. So I just want to say I am still familiar with anxiety. Anxiety is still living in me. I'm just controlling her more than she's controlling me, right? And the incidents that we had, and I hope we'll stop facing in the next foreseen future. But what was going on in London in the last 8 weeks also triggered my own anxiety. I found myself giving my kids all sorts of briefs before they got on the bus on the way to school from fear. So I just want to say, like, anxiety, and actually this is like completely legitimate fear, right? This is anxiety is about worrying about something that may happen. Fear is like that thing that I feel is more immediate. So I don't want to pretend like I've cut anxiety away completely from me. And by the way, Leslie, when I was really in the deep bad place, I had a life coach, not a therapist, a life coach. And he asked me, if you can cut the anxiety part of yourself completely, cut it, as if, almost like my father, it's not a good metaphor, like cut it completely away from yourself and not have anxiety in your system, klum, nothing, would you do it? And that was one of the most powerful questions I was asked, like, would I get rid of all my anxiety? And my answer was no, because I don't want to get rid of all those memories and all those stories and smelling the chicken soup that my grandmother's tried to shove into my throat. It's part of who I am. The question is, like, how do I build on that, and how do I find my meaning through it, and how do I grow? So going back to your question about how I healed my soul, I've been studying for the last 7 years. I study a lot by myself. I read. I educated myself. I spend a lot of time learning about Chassidut, learning from Chabad mainly. I really like Chabad, a way of educating, but not only. And I also have people that are my friends, and I'm on a journey with them. Lana is my friend. We study together, and it's step by step. One of the things that I actually like about Chabad specifically, and I'm saying this from my own personal experience, is the kind of step-by-step approach. And it's actually all about spirituality and finding your identity, which I find really engaging.
Fantastic answer, thank you. I've got more questions here, and I'm being told offline here that there's only time for one more.
Choose the hardest or the deepest.
Okay. So apologies to anyone who
Thank
didn't
you,
get
Leslie.
their questions asked. This is from Heidi. So she's read your book, which is why
Thank you, Heidi.
I'm prioritizing hers. She says that your grandmother's story definitely hit home for her. A question therefore is, how can we pass on the concept Simsum that you mention in the book? You don't have to be in full control, you only have to give space to the next generation, specifically within social media platforms that we chatted about, where social peacocking is the norm. So to finish off the questions that I'm asking you, what's your answer to Heidi and to everyone else?
So Heidi, you're asking of one of the most holiest concepts in Judaism, right? And when I wrote this in the book, I actually did go to get some advice. I wanted to make sure that I can write about Tzimtzum in this book, because it's so holy. So this is Heidi, like how I see it. So first of all, what is Tzimtzum? It's a very hard word to say in Hebrew, even for Hebrew speaking people. Tzimtzum is about condensing, it's about contracting, and it comes from the idea of the creation of the world. And even if you're not, whatever you believe in or not believe or religious, you don't have to be religious. Just think about this from a spiritual point of view. Before the world was created, in Judaism, there was only God. God was everywhere and everything. So you call it, the divine, the creator. And there was no world yet. There was no us. There was no plants. There was no Shema. There was no sky. Nothing. So because the divine was everywhere and it was everything, in order to be able to create us, to make the creation, he needed to condense himself, to make space for something to be born, for something to be created, which is it's humility. It's about condensing yourself, taking less space for yourself, to be able to create something new, to make space for something new. So the concept of Tzimtzum is about making space. And because we're human beings and all of us, all of us were created from that first breath that God injected into Adam's body. We're all spiritual, we're all godly, but we all have the ability to learn from that act of creation. So the way that I bring it to everyday life, I ask myself, am I taking too much space? Am I taking too much space in my marriage, with my children? Am I projecting too much of myself as a manager? And since I learned this, I know today I spoke a lot, and I'm sorry, but I think that was my job today. But let's say when I'm at work, I force myself to only speak 20% of the time, to make space of the 80% of the time for my team, for the spotlight, for them to create, to build themselves. So it's about condensing yourself and your relationships in your life to make space for others. And sorry to go back to Rory and to Neil and to Blair partnership. I think that when you as an agent, when you see that someone's coming with an idea and they're not confident yet and they don't sure, and you kind of make space for them, even, giving space for this book on the bookshelf, it's just such a beautiful act for a new idea, for a new creation, a new concept. And I just think that making space is something that we can apply in every area of our life. I don't know specifically about social media, maybe just making more space for yourself, to think about, what do I need to consume? What is good for me? And rather and making sure that you're looking after, the things that help you grow and create.
Well, that's...
Thank you, Michal. I think I'm going to hand back to our host now. I'm sure everyone's absolutely enjoyed listening to you. And as I said at the start, we'll now go out and buy your book and read all the details. But thank you very much for your time and fantastic answers. Lana and team?
Great. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Michal. I'm afraid that is all the time we have for tonight. And what an enlightening evening it has been. Thank you so much, Neil. Your continuing support for PJ is really, truly always appreciated. And a big, big thank you to Michal for being such a role model for Jewish and non-Jewish parents everywhere in the world. So people have a lot to look forward to when they read your book. I will show you that I have actually, when Michal says people, you take notes, it is actually practical. Here's my version. I've actually highlighted things and I do come back to it. So thank you for being so brave and volunteering your life experience and sharing it with us tonight and with everyone forever, because this book will be around Peace God for a long time. So tonight was really a taste of the type of wisdom and practical advice that Michal is sharing with us. So I do encourage you all to please get the book, Michal's book, What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid, which you can buy at uk.bookshop.org, which is an online retailer that supports local bookshops. And of course, there are other retailers you can get it at. As mentioned, this event has been recorded and we will send out links to it in a few days. So please look out for it and feel free to share it with family and friends. And also for everyone and anyone on this call who has not yet signed up their children or grandchildren to PJ Library, please do so. It's super easy. Exactly. Thank you, Michal. Super easy. Just go on our website, pjlibrary.org.uk for all the information. Thanks again. Oh, I love that one. I Dissent. Sorry, that's one of my favorites. It's Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Honestly, I love that book. I love the lady, bless her. Anyway, we're all inspirational. Michal, thank you for being an inspiration tonight. And thank you all for being with us. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lana. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.